Welcome to the Heat Pumped podcast. My guest today is Nate Adams, who's kind of a titan in the home electrification space. Some have called him the father of Electrify Everything, and he's been in this space for decades. I've gotten to know him over the past few months. We share a lot of ideas. Nate is willing to speak his mind freely, which I very much appreciate. And Nate, would you mind telling the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So, one of the first things to know might be I pulled my first client gas meter in 2014. So it's now over 10 years ago. That was well before all this stuff was cool. I bought electrifyeverything.net in 2018 and started the Electrify Everything Facebook group. Um, it was funny, it was a baker's dozen of electrifications. So it's not necessarily that many, but I was doing the house whispering projects that usually involved heavy shell work. So I averaged between 80 and 90 hours per project of work. So I couldn't do a lot of them because they were pretty intense. But I should back up a little bit further before that. So I grew up in a manufacturing family. So my dad restored really high-end cars, but then he made these high-precision steel sleeves. I know it's nerdy, and yeah, it is nerdy. But we had a pretty decent machine shop to be able to do all that. So I at least began to learn manufacturing, and then I got a pretty good idea of how business works. Because the accounting side of business is all kind of the same. What the company does is different, but everybody's got sales and expenses and accounts receivable and accounts payable and all that sort of thing. So it was useful to me to learn all of that sort of thing. And then things unfortunately didn't work out working for my parents. So I ended up working for a fiberglass insulation distributor.
Okay.
And I started in inside sales, but I moved to outside sales a year later, and I had a 4-state territory. And that was kind of where the building science began.
And probably a lot of skin rashes too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was more when I started doing installation contracting. So that's another but it was really interesting to actually see houses get built and begin to understand problems and begin to understand moisture. Like just all kinds of different things came in with working with contractors that were insulating new built homes. But then there was this little thing called a housing crash in '08, which took my wife and I's jobs with it 2 weeks apart from each other. And we were pretty well diversified. I was in building materials, she's in graphic design. So, we were pretty far apart. Boom, boom, 2 weeks apart. So I started an installation contracting company, which I'd been planning on doing anyway, because the place I was working for got bought by a manufacturer, and it felt like Office Space. So I literally had 5 bosses. It's like, where's the cover sheet on your TPS report? Like, ugh. Just like that line. Like when I screw up, I hear about it 5 times. The problem was they wouldn't talk to each other, and somebody was always mad at me.
Yep.
And it was just obnoxious. I'm like, look, I'll do whatever you want, but you guys need to get together and figure out how you want to prioritize my time. And then I'll do it. So I was miserable working for a big company and started doing installation contracting and jumped into retrofits because there's very little cash needs for that. I was beginning to understand it pretty well. I'd been taught by a couple of crazy Polish guys out in Wilkes-Barre, PA, how to do dense pack insulation. And so I started applying that. And after a few months, my wife looked at me and said, Nate, you need an employee. And to be clear, that means not me, because she was helping me for about 6 months. And that began a whole nother process where I learned that I don't really love being an employer. So I didn't necessarily have the skill set for it.
Sure.
But the other thing that I learned in that period, which I did a reasonable number of jobs and actually won a Department of Energy award from the Home Performance with Energy Star program. I won it in 2012 and shut the company down in 2013 because I was miserable again.
But at least you had a trophy.
Yeah, the margins weren't there.
Sure.
Because insulation as an idea is worth somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000 to most homeowners. Now, this is 20 years ago, almost. This is 15 years ago, 2009, 10, and 11. I guess 2009 through 2013. But one other thing that I found was the more I dug into building science and the more houses that I insulated trying to solve problems for clients, the more often I found that I was failing to solve them. I don't have like professional engineering in my resume or anything like that, but my dad had multiple patents and I'm good at mechanical understanding, even if I'm a lousy wrench. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm good at the conceptual side, not necessarily the actual doing it. So just tried to begin to figure out what that was. And as I was miserable, I met my old business partner, Ted Kidd, and he's the one that taught me how to be a house whisperer. It's like, well, you need the HVAC side of things.
Sure.
as well. So, I mean, what I come to think of everything is heat in needs to equal heat out all the time. And that's going to vary. Like in the summertime, you're pumping heat out of the house. In the wintertime, you're pumping it in with whatever you're using. So you can use a heat pump, you can use a furnace, whatever it might be. But that really started unlocking things. And we were really looking for a repeatable sales process to be able to do that. So I ran about a 70% closing ratio from lead to completed project. My planning process, planning process to project was 92%. So basically, if you got a plan for how to fix your house from me, you also paid me to actually execute it.
Sure.
Which was where I actually made my money. Before that, it was a lot of time, but crummy pay.
Right.
Like kind of jokingly small pay, which is why I don't think that model is repeatable, because it can only work with solo practitioners. There's not enough margin to even have an employee with what I was doing.
Sure.
Not saying you couldn't do it otherwise, but this is much easier to fold into an HVAC company in my mind.
Got it.
You're almost for sure going to sell something.
Sure.
A heating or cooling system. So there's at least a margin on that sale that you can play on. But did about 50 projects of house whispering from 13 through really 19, because like COVID, we ended up going traveling, bought a camper, and then ended up moving to West Virginia by accident. And so Cleveland is a good sized city. So there's plenty of work for a little small guy screwing around with high-end projects like what I was doing. But I was also bored doing it, to be frank. And I also saw that like my limit was 10 or 20 projects a year.
Sure.
And I wanted to actually find a scalable path to make comfortable, healthy homes the norm, not the exception. That's been my thing for a decade. How do we make it so anybody who wants one can get one? And me doing 10 or 20 projects a year, it doesn't matter. I wanted to see bigger impact than that. And so that was when I started turning into the HVAC 2.0 side of things, which is fundamentally a sales process for HVAC contractors, but it is steeped in building science. Like building science is all the way through it. And yes, there's psychology, and yes, it's a sales process, and like the sales shouldn't be a dirty word. They're required to have a company. It's, are you doing it ethically, and are you solving problems? If you're hitting both of those, okay. Fine, I'm good with it. And through all of that, particularly the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of diving into the policy side as well. So it was like January, February of 21, I put out a Twitter thread on how we should pay the HVAC manufacturers to stop making air conditioners and only make heat pumps, because there's almost no difference between them. And they all make both already.
Yeah.
Like the easiest way to describe it is it's like 2 Toyota Camrys, one that has reverse gear and one that doesn't, and otherwise they're identical. And like, do you really want a car without reverse gear?
It's fascinating, because if it was a car, that would be a lemon, and you would sue Toyota for selling it to you. But we accept it in air conditioners.
Well, we ask for it. No, I don't. Right. Heat pump crap. This is a basic technology. It's so basic. I forgot to grab it, but I brought a reversing valve with me. I keep one in my desk, and oftentimes in my backpack, because it's just not a complicated thing. It's a little bit different, but the installs are nearly identical. Like they should be within about 30 minutes of each other, as long as you have a whole new thermostat wire. So, I mean, I really view one-way air conditioners as intellectually stupid. Like, if you understand what they are, I'm like, if it's all you can afford, I understand. But like, why are you you're eliminating half or more of the capacity of that system over what comes down to $150 in parts. Unfortunately, it's more at wholesale level. Like it used to be $300 to $600, and now it's like $600 to $1,200 spread between the same model air conditioner and heat pump, because almost all the manufacturers make both. Like it's, you want a 14 SEER or 15 SEER product, like you can get an air conditioner or a heat pump.
Yep. And I think we can rant about this for a long time, and I think we should rant about this a long time a little later in this. But I'm kind of curious about where you're sitting right now, Nate. Tell me about where you're at.
So this is one of our all-electric Airbnbs. So I'm married to an artist. I call her terrifyingly efficient on one hand. So she does user experience work by day, but really art is what drives her, and she needs something going on all the time. So this house is board game themed. So behind me are box covers of a bunch of old board games that we managed to get our hands on, but they were missing parts. So like you couldn't play the game anymore.
Right.
but there's now 400 screws in that wall. So I hope that we don't have to refinish it anytime soon. Because I just kept buying another box thinking like this will do it, like a box of 100, and then I have to go buy another box. But what I also did to this house was like there's a bunch of houses here in southern West Virginia. So the New River Gorge National Park is right around the corner from here. The gorge is, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles that way. So there's all these houses that can use some love, but there's also demand for Airbnbs. And I actually wrote an article a few years back and actually talked to the head of sustainability at Airbnb and suggested make a category to create a vacuum. And unfortunately, that wasn't the direction that they went, but I defined how to do an all-electric house. And this is the first one that I did to meet that. So this is just a heat pump. There was a gas meter on this house. There's not anymore. It actually, strangely enough, it shared it between this and the house next door. This is technically the garage. I'm in the apartment over the garage, but the apartment over the garage is actually bigger than the actual house next door.
Yeah.
They're both little, but that's what you get. But since we had to go through the whole house and it didn't have a central system, I was like, well, let's put a heat pump in. And my buddy Roman Baugh, who is a giant Daikin fan. Did I mention giant? Giant. He busted my chops for a couple of years. And I'm like, all right, will you be my tech support if I buy them? Because they weren't even sold in West Virginia when I got them. So I drove to Texas and got them from a friend.
Nice.
And so we put Daikin fits in here. You can kind of see the control over my shoulder. It's a Daikin 1 thermostat. And this is a nice little system that's very reasonably priced. But so we did a duct design on this. And so it's metal trunks and then flex ducts coming off of it, which I've never played with flex before. I've never used it aside from just for noise reduction or insulation. And I wanted to see if it was quiet. I can never hear the system running in here ever.
Yeah.
Full tilt upstairs, can't hear it. Downstairs, I can vaguely hear the air handler. And outside, I have to look to see if the fan's spinning, to see if it's running. I can't hear the compressor. So this is a really nice little system. Plus, like the bath fan's vented outdoors. The range hood is right over here, and it's vented outdoors. And then it has an EV charger. So I followed what I wanted. So this is me practicing what I preach. And we have 5 houses. All of them are electric. 3 of them I pulled gas meters off of.
Yeah. Now there's probably a lot of people listening to this that would say, great, like I want to do exactly that to every single house in America. Like, do you think that makes sense? Do you think that's achievable?
No, not in the short term. I really don't. And like we were talking about this beforehand. So if anybody's watched The Princess Bride, I love the scene where he's like, fool, you've made one of the classic blunders. And one of them is never get involved in a land war in Asia. And the challenge of heat pumps is that it is not a technical problem. If we needed to, we could make a heat pump heat every house in the U.S. Some of the bills might be a little pricey, like there may be some interesting pieces, but could we make it work? Yup. Like the technology is there. But we have a human problem much more so than a technical one. Like you were saying and how you got into this space. You're like, oh, well, this should be easy. No, it's a human problem. It's not a technical one. The technical one has been solved. Honestly, like the first mini splits came out, it was like the late 70s or the early 80s where we did inverter compressors. Like that's pushing 50 years ago.
And like the cold climate heat pumps, early 2000s, like that was kind of a solved problem.
The commercials, like the VRFs and the VRVs, variable refrigerant flow and variable refrigerant velocity, those have been great for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think you could probably argue back into the mid-90s. So we've had the technology dialed for 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how you're arguing it, but it's not being applied. And that to me is like, it's this massive challenge, but we have 100,000 individual HVAC contractors, many of which have used heat pumps in the past, particularly in northern climates, and they hate them because used wrong, they're awful. And the single stage ones are like the whole saying about like, you shouldn't run a heat pump below freezing. For single stage, I'm not going to say that's 100% correct, but it's mostly correct because the experience can be really bad.
Sure.
But if you're only running it down to freezing or 40 degrees, something like that, it's a really good tool for that.
Right.
But then you move to the inverter stuff and it works. Like this house is amazingly comfortable.
Yeah.
And like I broke all the rules. I put pretty much all the supplies are in the middle of the house, not on the outside walls.
Sure.
There's only one exception. It was just because I knew where the furniture was going. And there was no other place to put one. But it's such a significant human lift.
Yeah.
And like when you look at the market of what's sold, I mean, we're selling ballpark 12 million a year of air conditioners, furnaces, and heat pumps together for U.S. residential, and like that actually includes some rooftops and some other things, but we won't. You dove into all that, by the way, so great job looking at some of the background of the numbers.
Yeah,
The RE numbers are like really broad.
yeah.
You look at like what's included, you're like, there's a lot in here, and maybe some of
Yep.
it shouldn't be, but we are selling ballpark 5 million one-way air conditioners a year. And those are the hard ones because a huge chunk of those, now you have to go by the numbers to see what it is. You got to buy it from Hardy to really see what the breakdown is. And I haven't spent the money. I don't even know how much it is, but I'd bet that it's like tens of thousands. You could at least see where these things are sold, but I would bet you quite a bit of money that the vast majority of one-way air conditioners are sold in northern climates.
Sure. Let me ask you this. Like, if random West Virginia homeowner bought the house that you're in right now and they were looking to like upgrade the HVAC system, what do you think they would have done? What would their journey have been?
We have gas here. It'd be a furnace and an air conditioner, like with near 100% odds.
Right.
Because the house next door had a furnace and an air conditioner, but the furnace cabinet was so rusted I could put my finger through the metal. Like it was bad. I don't even know why it was still hanging there because it's kind of a half basement, half crawl space. So it was hung horizontally. And I'm looking at this like, yeah, this thing's got to go. This had a ventless stove on the wall right behind me. That was the quote unquote central heating. And actually it did surprise me though, because I've always thought those have got to be horrific for carbon monoxide. And so I carry a carbon monoxide monitor in my backpack. It's sitting next to me. It's on the couch right around the corner here right now.
Yeah.
It never went off.
Okay.
And it only takes 10 parts per million. So that's another key thing to note about me and also about like solving human problems moving forward. We need feedback loops. Sure. So like part of why I've gotten good at what I do is I learn how things operate. I measure and I watch various things. So like I've been an indoor air quality monitor since 16. I actually beat LBNL to a comparative test. Their first one was 17 and I did it in 16. And thankfully they found that the same one that I liked won because I didn't have a reference instrument. I was doing this with zero budget.
Sure.
And then energy monitors I've been into since 15 or so.
Yeah, that was like the first thing you convinced me to do after I had the heat pump in my house. Is like, you're learning nothing from this if you don't know how you're using it. And so I went into my panel, I put in an Emporia view, and now I know when it's drawing current how much current it's drawing and all of that. So,
and the most important thing to me there is you can see how it's operating.
Yeah.
Because most of them still short cycle.
Yeah.
Like I've got a mini split on one of our Airbnbs. It's a camper.
Right.
So we really hacked it in there because campers have a 14 by 14 hole in the ceiling. Like, let's do a ceiling cassette, but that's a 22 by 22. I don't ever want to stand on that ceiling because I'll probably go through it. Like whenever we put something up there, we put like a piece of plywood to spread our weight out because I do.
Yeah.
Particularly with that big hole cut out. But I watch that thing run and it goes, so it turns on, it ramps up to full power, and then it shuts off.
Yeah.
It does not control the way that I would like to control it. So mini split controls honestly suck because I've played with a couple of them. They're all bad. What is it? Sorry, it makes me think of True Lies. Like, have you killed people? Yeah, but they were all bad. You know, like mini split controls are all bad because the systems themselves don't have the ability to control them the way that you want to. How do I know that? I watched them run. How do I know so much of the stuff that I've done? I've watched stuff run.
Yeah.
And that was something I learned from my dad. My dad was just this incredible mechanical savant. Like I've known a lot of really, really genius mechanical people. And I am not one of them. I'm not dumb, but I am not a mechanical savant. My dad was. And he told me one day, he's like, Nate, if you're trying to figure something out, sit there and study it and stare at it. Or if you can, like turn it and watch it work. And sooner or later, it will reveal its secrets to you and you'll know what to do. And it's not mystical. It's just letting your mind make the connections. Well, I sent you that meme that a friend of mine just sent me earlier. Like there's data and it was like this big pile of Legos.
Right.
And like you sort them into colors and then like you stack them in the colors together. But what you really need is the story, which was the Legos built into a house. And until you spend a lot of time watching feedback loops and learning, you aren't going to be able to understand some of the deeper lessons of how this stuff runs. So that's a lot of like the stuff when I'm fighting people, I'm just like, you idiots haven't actually watched how this stuff runs. Just go watch it run, and I can pretty much guarantee you're going to come to the same conclusions that I am.
Yeah. And that's like one thing that actually really changed my viewpoint. There's this guy on Blue Sky that posts monthly updates about his hybrid heat pump in Ohio. And he has all of this data and shows how much gas he's saving versus his previous setup and all of that. I think the thing that stood out to me is like he's cut like 90 or 95% of his gas usage, and he still has a furnace. And so I spent a good part of my early HVAC career saying furnaces are the devil. Like we need to completely electrify. I think like, I'm curious, like what are your thoughts about furnaces, Nate?
If we do not spend 5 or 10 years running 100% hybrids, basically, well, and I shouldn't say 100%. So there will be lots of heat pump only systems because honestly, climate zone 1 through 4, if you're not running heat pumps, what the heck is wrong with you?
Yep, we're climate zone 4 here in California. It's a no-brainer.
It's just a layup. Like, 'cause this is even on the edge of climate zone 4 here.
Yeah.
It's there's this little spike of 5, but if you look at the weather data, it's not 5. Although this winter sure as heck has been. Wow. I was like, hey, I moved away from Cleveland to get away from this weather. And it followed me because the last couple of winters have been nothing. But yeah, so climate zone 1 through 4 are really easy to do heat pump only. But 5 and up, particularly in older leaky homes, they legitimately need a furnace for the output that the furnace is capable of. I mean, just for anybody that doesn't know, the largest traditional heat pump for a home is 60,000 BTUs, which is 5 tons. A ton is 12,000 BTUs. The smallest normal furnace you'll find is also 60,000. Like there are 40s, and like don't get into the whataboutism, please. It's basically the range is touch is kind of the thing to note. And most heat pumps are 2 or 3 ton, which is 24,000 or 36,000. And like in Cleveland, my educated guess is that'll do half of homes today without touching them shell-wise, because it'll handle your smaller homes like 1,500 square feet or so. Yeah, 3 tons will usually do them. But I mean, we have challenges that the load calculations are wrong, but that's another subject. But with the furnaces, like, so a hybrid is a furnace plus a heat pump instead of a furnace plus an air conditioner. And I firmly believe that we need to do about a decade of them, because what I've seen again and again and again with my contractor friends is they start doing a couple of hybrids. I talk them into getting an Ecobee or an Emporia or something like that. And like, just watch it run, see what it does on a cold day. They're like, the furnace never kicked. Huh? Like, this is not a newsflash to me at all.
Yep.
Like, I want to know numbers so I understand like past energy use is actually a fantastic proxy for heat load. Like it's not dead on, but like I've seen manual J be plus or minus like 50 and 70%. Like it's usually actual heat load is really consistently half what manual J for heating shows.
Sure.
Like not always. It's like I always have to say like up to, and then
it's like you have your big asterisk. Yep.
I get into those arguments. I'm like, I didn't say a hard number. I said up to.
Yeah.
But like consistently, it's off by a factor of 100%.
Yeah. And I think an important thing to throw in there is like when you're talking about heating load of a house, that is like you're designing for the 1% coldest day. Of like with like no people in the house, and it's like really cold, and like you don't have your stove on and you don't have any space heaters going, and like basically it's like in the worst case, like we got to make sure the pipes don't freeze. Like we're designing to that, right?
But it's even more than that because it's holding 70 degrees.
Right.
It's not like holding 50 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing how many times, like, so what's the difference between the house, like, sliding a little bit and not sliding? It's usually about a space heater, which is 5,000 BTUs.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.
Right.
That's the difference. Like, it's just not a big deal. But yeah, the hybrids are an absolutely necessary path because of the human problem we were talking. So like the HVAC contractors, they do hybrids for a couple of years. They're like, well, this is dumb. I don't even need this. I just need to understand what my load is. And then I'll put a heat pump in. But then they have to talk their clients into it. And northern clients don't want it. Like I've heard from a number of friends down in Florida that the only furnaces they install are for snowbirds who insist on having a furnace in Florida. where it's just like, it's just not necessary.
Yeah.
Great heat pump climate. Like even in the northern parts where it's still climate zone 2 or 3. So we have this human problem we have to get over. So we really need to watch our puritanism, because if we want to move to 100% electric, I do not see any path ever. Like I can't, like short of guns to heads everywhere, it's going to be martial law, and we're going to have the heat pump Nazis out there pushing this. And like, that may sound harsh, but like that's what it's going to take, because
People are definitely going to snip that part of this quote, and you're just going to find that on social media
right?
everywhere.
I know, it's the heat pump Nazis. Here we go. By the way, I should state that I am one of the very few people in the space that has rightward political leanings. I'm still pretty centrist. But years ago, it was watching An Inconvenient Truth that convinced me. I still don't like Al Gore. I find him extremely hypocritical and annoying. But he made a really good argument. So I can separate a person from an argument. And that's an important thing that we need to be able to do. But that's also one of the challenges that we have here is if we push heat pumps too hard on their own, it becomes politicized. And it has. Like, I'm in a whole bunch of HVAC groups, and some of the guys are awesome, and some of them are modern day Neanderthals. Just is. You can see the absolute worst in human nature sometimes in there. But I'm starting to hear like they want us to have heat pumps, or those damn liberals, or other words that end in tard. Like there's all of these things that I see out there, and I'm like, this is like reverse gear. We are politicizing reverse gear. So like I want to make a video this summer, which is me pushing my truck, or I don't know if I can push my truck because the thing weighs like 5,500 pounds, but pushing it out of a parking space backwards and saying, so I really didn't want that reverse gear. I was glad I saved the money, and those damn liberals didn't get what they wanted. Like, people, this is dumb. It's so dumb.
But I think my take on it is like a big part of like HVAC and just sales in general is like you got to meet people where they are. And like you can't change everyone's mind, but you can kind of tell them a story on why this is better for them in a bunch of other ways. And like, or you don't even make it a decision for them. You sneak a heat pump in there for them. They don't even realize they have it. Works great, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you're running decent margins, like I'm not I work very hard not to advocate for doing things for free for contractors.
Yeah.
Because as much as you hear complaints about how expensive things are, if you look at the inside of a contracting company, they have an insane number of soft costs. It's just
tell me about it.
What's that?
Tell me about it.
But yeah. You're watching it now. So like I hear people like, rah, rah, rah. I'm like, you go start one and do exactly what you're saying, and I'll see you here in 2 years when you're out of business.
Yep.
Because like it's a challenging business. Like it's incredibly complicated. I mean, I don't know if you think about this, but it's actually 5 different trades in one. We'll see if I can remember all of them. But I mean, it's refrigeration, it's plumbing, it's sheet metal, it's electrical, and it's carpentry. Not always carpentry, but sometimes you've got to move something around. And that's a big lift. And there's all these different things that you need to know. And there's all these different sensitivities, some that matter more than others, a whole lot that matter more now than they used to with EC motors and so forth. And like all the inverters being very sensitive to power quality, where the old units just didn't care. They were like Mongo. It's like huge linebacker. You throw a 300-pound linebacker on the back of a 300-pound linebacker, and he slows down, but he keeps running. He ain't stopping. And that's what a lot of the old systems were. They were nearly bulletproof, so you could install them really badly and they'd be okay. But now we've got these dainty systems that if you don't install just right, are like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't work today. I got a fart stuck sideways, sorry. It's just insane. Like a lot of the changes, but how the industry has not kept up.
Yeah, and I'll layer one other thing too. It's like it's 5 trades plus engineering too. Like you have this like big design problem. Like you actually have to select the right system for the house. You have to think about the design temperatures. You have to think about the building envelope. So yeah, there's
all that, and almost no insulation HVAC contractors think about this. And also like on the installation side, like I stopped referring installation contractors because I got bit 100% of the time.
Sure.
I got complaints from my friends.
Yeah.
About the work. And I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. Like it's not ethical for me to recommend someone. And that's really hard. So, and it's also a challenge in the HVAC industry. There's very few people that I will recommend without like some design or something. But that actually, let's pull that back to hybrids again. So a heat pump plus a furnace. If you put a gun to my head, on basically any house, I'm going to say stack a 3-ton variable speed heat pump on top of a modulating furnace. That's going to give me heating from 6,000 to 60,000 BTUs and cooling from 6,000 to 36. And that will work in like 90% of US homes. Is it the right piece of equipment? No. Will it work and work pretty well? Yep. So that's one of the things that makes hybrids super flexible. Like you can just put that in. So like with a hybrid, it's emergency install compatible because we've got 85 or 90% of installs that are emergencies. So it needs to be on the shelf. And we probably don't have time to do the whole dog and pony show and the full load calc and all that kind of thing. So a hybrid is very friendly to emergency changeouts. You don't have to run a load calc. Please understand, I am not saying don't run a load calc. It's still a bad idea. But the reality is 99% of systems are put in without a load calc. They're like for like. You got an 80K furnace and a 3-ton air conditioner, you're getting an 80K furnace and a 3-ton air conditioner. That's what you're getting. Nobody's changing anything. And then, I mean, there's so many other nice little advantages. Do you need to do a panel upgrade? Nope. Just reuse that same breaker from the air conditioner. There's just all of these things that just make it simpler. And then we get everyone used to a new technology. And even a single stage heat pump, like say it's a 3-ton 80K, which is such an awful pairing. Every house I've seen with that pairing has comfort problems because it's way oversized. It's 2 to 3 times larger than most houses need, in my experience, with an 80,000 BTU furnace. So like I've got all kinds of comfort problems, but if I can put that 3-ton in, even a single stage, then their heating options are 36,000 or 80. Sure. It's not quite 80. It's like 75 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever the efficiency is. People will find that heat pump runs a lot. And what I found from basically every hybrid client is they prefer the heat pump, with the biggest guy being, hopefully, you know, Jim Bergman.
Yeah.
Of MeasureQuick. So Jim is a super duper nerd. He knows all the formulas and all the stuff, but he's also he's such a ball buster. His love language is just making fun of each other. You have to go into it ready for that. And like he means it in love. Like if he's making fun of you, it pretty much always means that he loves you. That's blue collar love language. But I remember I met him first in 2017, and it was a group of people, and he was making steaks for all of us. But it's not a tenderloin, so he cut it all up into filet mignons. And I started talking to him about mean radiant temperature, which is the average of surface temperatures around us, and how a heat pump can actually make a house far more comfortable than a furnace is capable of. And he just ignored who I was at that point, and all of a sudden he looks at me, he's like, "Who are you again? What's your name?" Like I was all of a sudden worth talking to. And then I busted his chops, and so did some of my friends for years. And he finally stacked a Bosch heat pump on top of his old furnace. He had a decent 3-stage Rheem furnace. He started running his heat pump harder and harder. He's like, the furnace would kick on in the middle of the night, and it was noisy enough it would wake me up. The heat pump never shuts off, so it never wakes me up. My basement was never, ever, ever comfortable. It was always cold. And I saw, like, he had a pellet stove down there to try and make it more comfortable. And that, like, he's running space heaters and stuff. He's like, and I switched to the heat pump, and all of a sudden my basement's comfortable. So, like, a huge credit to Jim, because he's called me several times now and said, "Nate, you were right," that's a hard thing to do. He's a really opinionated dude. Seen Jim talk at all. Like, he will mock you, tell you that you're wrong, and be right pretty much all the freaking time. Like if it's equipment stuff, I don't fight up because I'll lose. I know what I'll lose on.
Yeah.
I don't even tread that. But his experience is so consistent. If we can get hybrids in and not be like, it's gotta be all electric or nothing. Because to move all electric, if you're in a colder climate, you're going to crush people with bills. You got a leaky old house, like it can be bad. Like you see very high loads, but are people going to spend 20 or 30,000 to do a good shell retrofit? No. And it has no resale value. I know people will argue with me on that. I won't put the money in personally. How I use my money probably should say something, you know?
Yeah. Can you back that up a little bit? I really want to touch on that, like, comfort. For the uninitiated, can you kind of like walk through why the comfort is different?
Yeah. So the easiest illustration that I've found is, imagine that you have 10 gallons of hot water to get clean with. And I give you the option of either the hot bucket challenge, because it's not the ice bucket challenge, but you get 10 gallons of hot water dumped over you all at once, or you can take a 5-minute shower. Same amount of heat, same amount of water, or energy, or however you want to look at it. Which one would you prefer? I had one, Stephen Lacey, that's a good friend of mine and a longtime reporter in the clean tech space. He's like, all right, well, so I'll take that just to be different. Like, is that what you really want? Nah. So you want the shower. So you want that gentle stream of heat, and then you can, soap yourself up and rinse it off and, wash your hair and all of that. And you get some time to just experience that warmth, and it's all around you. And like, it's warming up the whole bathroom at the same time, hence it's all steamy. So HVAC works the same way. I call that load matching. At various moments, every moment of every day, a house is going to need a slightly different amount of heating or cooling. And if you can match that, it's like that shower. So you put in the stream of hot or cool air into the house, and it's very gentle. And so that warms up the walls, that warms up the couch, it warms up all the other building materials. It's your cabinets, like everything gets nice and even in temperature. And the first time I experienced that was, it was 2014, and it was a second electrification that I did. It was the first one I got to do the way I wanted to. I was a Carrier Greenspeed. And actually the house wasn't insulated yet. It was a 1918 house with like a 7,000 blower door.
Sure.
And he'd found this deal where it would cap how much his electricity cost. So the meter's out there going, because it was running so much resistance. But I walked in and I'm like, this is the most comfortable place I've ever been in by an order of magnitude. Like, I didn't believe it until I felt it, and that's normal. You have to experience it.
Yeah.
All of us are doubting Thomases. I want to put my finger in the hole in the hand. And so by that house could match how much heating it needed at any given moment, and it warmed everything up, even though the shell on that house was still horrific. We took that from a 7,000 to an 1820. I still remember the number. 1,820 CFM 50 at 50 pascals. That's the blower door number on that house right now. And that house was remarkably comfortable. This house is that way too. Ironically, I screwed this house up with a heat pump water heater. It's got a freaking error on it, so I'm just waiting for the compressor to die someday. But I only put one vent into, it's like a 4-car garage under here, but it's running too cold, and so the floors are cold. So I need to cut another vent down there and get it closer. But like, if the floors are warm in this place, this house has really good comfort.
Yeah, and I think it's like a big psychology shift, right? Because like I've grown up with the like on-demand comfort like lifestyle, right? It's like you keep putting sweaters on until you get so cold that you got to kick the furnace on. Like that's how my family always was like growing up. But I think the magic, right, is like what you said. It's the same amount of water. I'm not using more water, letting my shower run for 5 minutes. It's the same bucket of water, and I think that's the real magic there.
It really is. Actually, there's an additional layer of magic, which is slightly nerdy, but I think we should touch on it.
Okay.
So machinery oftentimes is extremely efficient running at partial load.
Yes.
So like, I'll give an example of one house that I did. So they had a furnace. It was a York variable speed furnace. And at the time, York only had a 2-stage heat pump available. Like 6 months later, they had a variable. But when I did the job, that was the option. But the house did not have enough ductwork, which is a whole nother story, but I won't dive into that too hard. But that air handler on low was burning like 50 watts. So think of like a 100-watt light bulb. It was burning about half that.
Yeah.
To move 300 CFM of air all the time. So it's a few dollars a month, really, to run that, to get better comfort and air quality. And you can bring in outdoor air with that. There's a lot of things you can do with that same money. But when I turned that system up to 1,200 CFM, it was pulling like 1,100 watts, and it sounded like it was going to come unglued. Like it was not a happy system because it didn't have enough ductwork to move the air that it was trying to move. And what I found is at low stage, most of the air handlers that I do, so it's usually 300 CFM, cubic feet per minute, and like a cheap bath fan is 50 CFM, just kind of for some kind of reference. So it's a reasonable amount of air, not a ton, but a reasonable amount. And I find that gets moved for somewhere between 15 and 50 watts, which is just nothing.
A light bulb.
Yeah.
On the high end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like maybe a couple of LED light bulbs oftentimes.
Yeah.
So it's like $3 to $10 a month, depending on your power rates and how much it's pulling. But it's just not that much. And you get a lot of benefit out of that. But if you run that same system much higher, it pulls a whole lot more power to do the same work. And the same is true of the compressor outside. If you're not working the compressor too hard, they're really, really efficient.
Yeah, so I was looking at some charts for some of the equipment I installed for a customer recently, right? And it's basically low load and warm temperatures. These like heat pumps, they're incredibly efficient. And like for the California climate, it was like a COP of 5 which like 500% efficient. For every 1 unit of electricity you put in, you get 5 units of heat. That's wild.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you get into the colder climates and you're going to run between, 2 and 3 generally
Right.
the season.
Right.
But still, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Depends on your spark gap, your cost difference between gas and electric. Although that's another thing, back to hybrids again in the mainstream, you can just set where the changeover point is. So like if gas is really expensive 1 year, run the heck out of the heat pump. If electric's really expensive 1 year, run the heck out of the furnace. Like you have fuel arbitrage options.
Which you can't do with a one-way AC.
Nope. No, exactly. Yeah. There's 3 main systems in my mind. You've got a furnace and an air conditioner, a furnace and a heat pump, and a heat pump. Those are the 3 main US options, and Canadian too. I can hear my buddy Abby screaming at me. In Canada. He and I do the Boundary Spanners podcast, by the way, which is the intersection of policy and HVAC. But of those 3, only a furnace and an air conditioner can't heat with electricity. The other 2 can. So if you have either a heat pump or a furnace and a heat pump, you can heat with electricity. And like getting a 50% reduction in gas usage is like a layup. Like if you don't hit it, what are you doing wrong? I mean, there's a nice little study out of Toronto. It was like 3 or 4 houses, but the worst house, they put a crappy system in. It was a single stage heat pump on top of a basic furnace. And this is Toronto, so it's pretty cold. It was a 3,000 square foot 1960s house. So like it's a big house that's leaky with a crappy system. 55% reduction in gas use. Would you like 55% or would you like nothing? Because right now, those are our options in cold climates if we don't do hybrids. So for mainstream, hybrids are it. Do I love it? No. Because the engineer in me is like, this is stupid. Why are we going to use 2 tools when one will do it better? I think it's I think air conditioners, one-way air conditioners are intellectually stupid. I think hybrids are in many cases intellectually stupid. But my engineering side does not determine what the market's going to do. And like you said, we have to meet people where they are.
Like I tried to get quotes from my parents' house in the Midwest for a heat pump, and I called around to a few different contractors. Some of them I found them through the like heat pump company website. Like, so I got referred through them as like, oh, they're an authorized heat pump installer. And every single one was like, oh, why would you want that? Like, no, we don't do heat pumps. No, heat pumps are junk. Like I, as a heat pump enthusiast, like pretty deep in this like climate, like put pretty deep in this space, could not for the life of me find someone that would put a heat pump in. And so like, how do we bridge that then? Like, how do we get all those people on?
It's hybrids or nothing. Those are the 2 options. Because otherwise, yeah, it's going to be the heat pump Nazis. We'll see if that trends. But I mean, it's going to require guns to heads. And I mean, to some degree, you can do guns to heads with huge incentives. So like in Denver, they've had a $10,000 incentive for a while, but the money's running out. And I've been watching this space for a long time now, like 15 years watching incentives. How many incentive programs have ever actually achieved market transformation, which is like all of their goal? Not a freaking one. And it's really simple. When you get to about 1% penetration, it becomes both financially and politically untenable to continue. And 1% penetration is not going to matter. It just doesn't move the market. I mean, we just saw this with the IRA. And the IRA funding in California ran out in 2 months, which is what Rap and Class predicted, by the way, and me before that. Like, this is a dumb way to spend our money. It's not going to move the market. It's not going to change anything. And the odds are really high that most of them will be installed badly. And then we're going to hurt the people that can least afford to fix those systems.
You were talking to me a little bit earlier about like early adopters versus mainstream. Like, I think a lot of people still believe that heat pumps are a bit of an early adopter product. Would you agree? Do you think that's where the market actually is?
For full electrification, yes. It's not even just the early adopters. It's the first 2.5%, which are the innovators.
Sure.
Those are the people that want it just because it's new. It doesn't even matter if it works. And that's, well, so yeah, let's talk about the bell curve of it. So, and this is based, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. Everyone should read that book, and everyone listening to this should spend at least a couple of weeks in a truck with an HVAC installer, an installation company, sit at the kitchen table with the HVAC sales guy or lady, and get some boots on the ground field experience, because like, it is so obvious to me when I can see that somebody's early in Dunning-Kruger. I'm like, oh yeah, you think you know all this. Man, you've got to fall down that hill of despair, and you're going to be there for a while, because I sure as hell was, and I still am. Like, I do not think, as things stand, that 2050 is possible. It's like 1 in a billion. And the curse is, if we'd done what I suggested, AC to heat pump in 2022 with the IRA, we'd have a 1 in 10 shot.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's on the table.
And can you explain to people that don't know, like, what is 2050? Like, why that goal?
Oh yeah, well, I mean that's just a common climate goal. You need to be at 80% reduction in fossil fuel usage by 2050. Like that's kind of a known long-term thing. And it's not that hard, like particularly 80%. Like hybrids can do 80%. Just saying. Like
Sure.
it's very much on the table. We modeled really conservatively a 39% reduction. Really conservative. That was a 41 degree or 5 degrees Celsius changeover. Like that's really conservative.
Right.
And so, yeah, I cannot see like the 2050 happening because it's super simple math behind that. A good system should last 15 to 20 years. Really, they last like 10 to 20. I hear a lot of like 5, 8, 10, 12-year failures, and it's a whole nother subject, but efficiency standards have really made equipment a lot worse at this point, unfortunately. Like now we have to focus on install quality a lot to make up for the uphill battle we just gave the HVAC contractors, who are oftentimes just not good at their jobs. Just like so hard to watch.
And I mean, I think I tie this back a little bit to your thing about ride along in the truck, right? It's like they're not good at their jobs, but it's also like you're working in this hot crawl space. It's 120 degrees. Like you're crawling on these rafters. Like it's a hard job. Like I think we have to preface that.
Into your head. The system just failed. They don't have heating. They don't have cooling. They're emotional. They just had a huge unexpected expense hit them. I mean, it's like the second or third largest, third or fourth, sorry. Biggest expense in our lives is our house, then our vehicle, and then either the roof or the HVAC.
Right.
It depends on different factors. But this is a big expense that you just got hit with that you weren't expecting. Of course, you're going to try and minimize it. So with 85 or 90% of installs being emergencies, thinking about that bell curve of people. So the first 2 standard deviations, it's just a bell curve, are 16.5%. The next 2 big chunks, that's the fat part of the curve, was it 37 each, I want to say?
Sounds about right.
Each.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then you've got on the other side the laggards who only get it. Like my in-laws are that way. I went with them to buy their first cell phones, and the salesperson's like, "So, what features are you looking for?" I'm like, "The ability to make and receive phone calls." That's all I cared about. Like, we never got them to text, nothing. And finally, we couldn't get a flip phone, and they got an iPhone. And finally, we get texts, and it's lovely because we can send pictures back and forth. It's just amazing. But they are totally laggards. Until the technology was no longer available, they didn't switch. And that's the last 2 standard deviations.
Well, I think an interesting thing about what you just said that stood out to me is like they just care to make phone calls and send texts. That is like the function of a phone is to do those things. And the function of an HVAC system is to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So like ignore like everything else, like who cares about SEER numbers and HSPFs and like all of that like noise. 95% of America does not care.
And that's where we need to get to. Well, and the other challenges of climate motivated folks. I mean, I had an article came out summer before last where I said most climate focused clients are jerks, because I find that about 75% of climate focused clients have small budgets and high expectations, which makes them nightmare clients. And then if they're miseducated, which is very common right now, thank you, rewiring. Now there's no trust and you have to try and re-educate them, but they've already been educated by a trusted third party, individual or organization. And now you have to try and change them while you're trying to sell them something. You're not.
Yep. And contractors are like some of the least trusted people. It's like probably like contractors are up there with like what dentists and like
used car salespeople.
Repo men. Yeah.
This is not a trust-filled relationship to begin. We really don't need to hurt that, and oftentimes that's hurt. So of the climate folks, not that many people are actually going to spend the money to do it right, and then it's going to end up becoming a problem in one way or another for the contractor afterwards. So that's challenging. So we're talking about like a couple tenths of a percent of the market at the end of the day that are willing to do what they need to actually electrify their homes.
Yeah.
So okay, we want to move forward. Forcing full electrification ain't going to happen. I've been looking at this for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. I've talked a bunch of clients into pulling their gas meters with cheap gas, 30-cent therms. I've done all this. I know how to do this. If you think it's possible, go out there and show me. If you're going to tell me, I want you to shut the hell up. I do. Like, seriously, go stick it. I know that's harsh, but I have seen so much idiocy and early Dunning-Kruger work because people haven't spent enough time in the field. Go do the work, go watch the work get done, go sell the jobs, and then come back and we can have an intelligent discussion. Until then, I'm the boss. And I know that may sound egotistical, but it's just frank. Look, this is Danielson trying to tell Mr. Miyagi what to do. Like, it's just wrong. Mr. Miyagi knew what the hell he was doing. Just shut up and wax the car. Again, it's harsh. There's the fierce part of me in there. But I genuinely like to see this happen. And last year, I gave up on home decarb being more than 50% complete before I die, which is probably 2060-ish. I'll be 82. We are on such a bad path for it.
So you're Mr. Miyagi and you're president of the United States. What are you going to do, Nate? How are you going to get that meaty part of that bell curve?
We've got to do AC to heat pump. We have to, because with 85 or 90% of equipment being emergencies, if it's not on the shelf, it doesn't get installed. As the joke goes, if it's in stock, we've got it. But like Chicago, like I have people push back on me all the time, but then I've got friends in Chicago, like, so can you buy heat pumps there? Like, no, I usually got to go to Milwaukee or I got to go to Gary, Indiana.
Really?
Yeah, most of the equipment. So is that second or third largest city in the country? I can't remember. It's New York, LA, and Chicago, I think. And it's genuinely difficult to buy a heat pump of almost any variety. Like you can get mini splits, but mini splits in my mind don't count. They don't get used for central home uses, not in cold climate.
That's crazy to me because like 2 years ago, the AHR Expo, like the big like heating and air conditioning expo was held in Chicago. All of the manufacturers, and so you're telling me if I went to a distributor there, I like couldn't find one on a shelf.
Yeah. It's one of the guys in HVAC 2.0. I'm not doing that anymore. I told him to go get a heat pump water heater. He had to drive to Wisconsin to a Home Depot to buy one. And like all this other stuff, you have to special order in. So it's not on the shelf.
Yeah.
So we have to address the emergency replacement problem. There's no way around it.
Sure.
We're not going to be sizing equipment because it just never is. We've got to meet people where they are. And you're not going to talk a contractor into dumping a furnace or a homeowner easily in a cold climate, which, by the way, an important metric that I looked up a couple of years ago, natural gas use in American homes. The two biggest states are California and Texas because they have a crap ton of population. And California is frankly stupid. What the heck are you doing on a freaking fault line running explosive stuff through pipes?
I mean, and we saw it with the wildfires too. Like LA was up in flames and like the gas lines did not help.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
So, but that was a political game, really. That was a human problem. That was not a technical problem.
Yeah.
But behind Texas and California, the next 9 states use 50% of U.S. natural gas. It's basically the Midwest.
Sure.
So it's like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan. I don't know if Minnesota was in there or not, but like you look at it, Missouri was in there. It's basically the Midwest. So it's where it's starting to get cold. And we've got a really good gas network. That, if we don't do hybrids, we will not touch. It's not going to happen.
We touched on this a little early on. Like, tell me more about like heater and cooler and like.
Okay. Yeah. So I first proposed the idea of, so it's called $150 parts difference, or we can call it 200 if you want, but that's about the difference between an air conditioner and a heat pump of the same variety. So I'm not comparing a Kia to a Lexus. I'm comparing a Kia to a Kia, one that has reverse, one that doesn't. And so I proposed paying the manufacturers $400 a piece, and so that they would stop making, it was per unit. So for every air conditioner they didn't make, they'd get $400. And it's purposely a little bit rich for a couple of reasons. The first year is going to be a cluster. It's going to be warranty city, and all like they're going to have to pay to educate people. Like it's going to be a crazy first 2 years or so, and then people are going to start figuring stuff out. So it needs to be a little heavy. But then the idea was knock it back $50 a year, or a certain dollar amount per year until it goes away. Because it's a business term that I hadn't heard before then, but it's called SKU rationalization. So it's the number of products that you carry, you purposely pare it back hard.
Sure.
And like no one can agree on what it saves, but it's pretty much for sure in the 3 to 15% range. And guess how much that is? It can be $150.
Yeah.
Because I mean, all this, the changeovers on the line where you have to go air
Yeah.
conditioner, heat pump, air conditioner,
Yeah.
heat pump. You just put it
Yeah.
in, you just run all heat pumps. You're going to change what
Yeah.
model heat pump you're running, but you're not going to switch between ACs and heat pumps. How much space do you need to stock it? About half. How hard is it to get it to distributors? How much space do distributors need on their shelves? About half. Like all of these things add up. And I think it would be cost neutral after a while. So I proposed that in a Twitter thread in 2021, beginning of the year. And then Steve Pantano, who's now at Rewiring, and then Alexander Gard-Murray both reached out and they said, this should be a paper. Let's run the math on this. And it was funny that did all kinds of backflips and modeling and so forth. What's it going to take at the manufacturer level to actually get the manufacturer's changes? $303. I was pretty close for pulling it out of my butt, but that requires at least $1,000 at the consumer level because you've got two markups in there. So this is best done as close to the manufacturing level as possible. Now, the OEMs weren't absolutely thrilled with it because they're like, this is going to look like a corporate handout. I'm like, well, yeah, it is, but this is the cheapest way to get it done. So like this is a good lever to pull. By the way, at that point, I don't know if I ran the math correctly for sure, but I came up with $7 a ton for carbon dioxide. That's pretty cheap, and we didn't do it. But that paper turned into the Heater Act, which was put out by Senator Klobuchar's office. And it was a little sausagey. It was a little tortured at times, but I think it probably would have worked. And then Alexander, and then another friend who, Zach Millimet, who was working for Senator Martin Heinrich's office, they wrote a very clean version that was aimed at distributors. Because I don't love doing that because like on the manufacturer level, you're talking dozens of companies that make these. There's not a lot. So like one part-time government employee could run a $10 billion program.
Sure.
Like, and they could run it in like 2 days a quarter. It's like there's no chance for graft on this hard line.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to say no, but it's very low chance. Like it's good, fast, and cheap, which is super rare to get all three. There's very, very few things I've ever seen that do that. So the Cooler Act, it never got introduced, but it's super clean. I think it's like 7 pages long, which in legislative text, that's short.
Yeah.
That's really, really short. And it pays the distributors to stop stocking air conditioners and only stock heat pumps because the goal needs to be to have only heat pumps on the shelf. And then pair it with whatever. You want to pair it with a propane furnace? Okay. Gas? Okay. Heat strips? Great. I don't care what it gets paired with. It's going to take us a significant portion of where we need to go, and we're going to move hearts and minds of both contractors and homeowners. And without doing that, the end of decarb is impossible because it's 15 or 20-year lifespans. So, I mean, if it's 20-year lifespans, we're looking at 2030. 15-year lifespans, we're looking at 2035, where we need to be at 100% heat pumps. And so should we really get stuck on the backup heat source when, 60, 70, 80, 90% reductions are very possible? I don't think we should. And if you argue for that, I'm going to fight you. Because I don't think you have actually done the hard work of figuring out what's likely to work and what's not.
Yeah. And I think like one thing both of us have been talking about a little bit is like, the homeowner doesn't really need to have the association of heat pump. The contractor probably doesn't really need to have the association of heat pump too, right? Like the difference between a heat pump and a one-way AC is one valve. It still works perfectly fine as an air conditioner. There's like no difference.
Yeah.
And that's where we've started talking about two-way ACs and using that as like an education tool and being able to compare a two-way AC that has reverse gear and a one-way AC, which in my head is broken.
Yeah, like I said, my good buddy Ken Dean, he put the HVAC in both at our house and then at Moth Manor. He's early 70s, acts like he's 25. He's awesome, but he had polio when he was a kid. So his left hand is like just messed up. It's like about half the size, almost like it's just missing a bunch of muscle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, I call air conditioners crippled heat pumps, and I can do that because I'm a cripple. So he's got a good sense of humor about it. He plays drums in like 4 different bands. He's way cooler than I am, 25 years older. But yeah, the two-way ACs can be a better way to educate people so that you realize, look, you're only getting half the capacity and really usually much less than that Because like the northern climates where air conditioners are most common, ACs run 3 to 5 months a year, something like that. And a heat pump can run all 12. Now it's not going to run all 12 the whole time because when it gets cold, like you're going to switch to the furnace if you have a hybrid. But you can run it a whole lot more, so more than double the use out of the same machine. And if it's installed well, this doesn't really have significant lifespan implications, because really what matters to most machines is cycles, not being on. So like it's just like in cars. Do you want a car do you want a cab with 100,000 miles on it from New York City? Or do you want a salesman's car with all highway miles with 100,000 miles on it? Of course you want the salesman's car. I mean, it
Exactly.
has the crap beaten out of it. It's a cycle problem.
Yeah.
So if we're right-sizing equipment at its variable speed, and the goal is to have it never, ever, ever shut off. It's not actually possible, but that's the goal. And if that's the case, these things just last.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we probably have 3 different types of people watching this. And so we probably have homeowners, we probably have contractors, we probably have policymakers, and then a few other people too. But like for those 3 groups, like what advice do you leave each of them?
Do whatever you can to get air conditioners off the shelf in a way that is not coercive, and be very careful how you frame it. It should be framed as an increase in consumer choice, because a hybrid gives you twice the heating fuel choice as you have with a furnace and an air conditioner. So you're doubling consumer choice. I think that's critical. Talk about comfort. Comfort is the number one reason to run heat pumps, because it's going to run a lot more and you're going to get that shower effect rather than the bucket effect. Think about a furnace that is 3 times oversized when it's 10 degrees outside. At 50 degrees outside, it's 15 times oversized or something along those lines. So you can watch runtime and it'll run for a couple of minutes and shut off. I mean, you can notice it in a lot of houses. I'd comment on it when I was doing comfort consults and my blower door tests and stuff and whatnot. I'd be like, oh, there's the furnace again. Oh, there it is. And so I would call attention to it and how short the run times were. Like, yeah, it's depending on what the weather is outside, you can get an idea of how well sized it is. And so comfort is the number one. Comfort and consumer choice those are the 2 biggest reasons to talk about heat pumps and hybrids in my mind. Do not make this political. Please, it's too late at this point. I mean, like I just heard, which conference was it? But the DOE, there were people from the DOE that were going to be giving a presentation on the results of the cold climate heat pump challenge, which have been pretty good. And they were told that they couldn't do it or they'd be fired, because heat pumps are now politicized and the political winds have shifted. So when you do things, try and think about what's going to happen if the other team's in. And remember, I lean right politically. I'm a weirdo. I'm not thrilled about a whole lot of stuff, but I'm always pissed because I don't like anything that's going on. Being a centrist is just like a ticket to being angry if you pay attention to political things. But be very, very careful how this stuff gets framed. But if you're a homeowner, air conditioners are dumb. They just are. Get a heat pump or ask for one. And if you ask for it in a hybrid form, like, all right, you're going to do a basic air conditioner, great. Make it a basic heat pump. And you may need to do some homework on how to set that up because the contractor may not be good at it. But it's not that hard. And even if it's wrong, it'll still be better than what you have now. But you can make it pretty right. But that's a feedback loop thing. Back to what I was talking about a while ago. If you get I recommend, if you're getting basic equipment, get an Ecobee thermostat, because they chart when the equipment's running. And so you can understand what stage it's in. And like if the furnace is taking over sooner than you want, you can make changes to shift that around. Like that's a really flexible thermostat. But I would recommend not going with single or 2-stage, because now there's low-end inverter equipment that it acts like a 2-stage, but it's priced similar to a 2-stage, oftentimes lower. At least do one of those. And if you can, move to what I call fully communicating. And this is nerdy, but you need to be able to run a cold coil at minimum output. And very, very few systems are actually capable of that, like a couple percent.
Yeah.
Like so many. So that's a humid climate problem, which you're not there now, but 80% of Americans live in a humid climate. And dehumidification and doing electrifications, that was my hardest challenge. Heating the house on cold days, not really a problem. Like I maybe use more resistance than I wanted. I mean, we've been to minus 20 with some of my systems, and they all kept up.
Yeah.
I got a text about the bill, but also it's one ugly bill.
Right.
And then in the summertime, they're gentler. So it is what it is. It's going to happen. But yeah, look high end And then when you're looking for contractors, do not use the big ones. The big guys charge a fortune to do awful work. Sometimes they've got low prices. Their work is still awful. I don't care. Like, I have yet to see a private equity shop do great work.
Yeah. And I've heard time and time again, the very best technicians from those companies, when they get bought out, they go off, they start their own companies, they go off, work for their buddies. Yeah.
Well, they get told to do the same job in half the time. And like, you can, but not right. And like, we're talking about hours. The difference between a really good HVAC install and a really bad one is 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of our time with our installs, like making it look pretty and like the details. The details are what screw you up. And they don't take that much time, but they take enough time that they're very easy to cut out.
Yes. The big shops are oftentimes aiming for 2 installs per crew per day, which you can do, but they're not good installs. They're not paying attention to vacuum and some of the other things. And actually, I'll use this to plug something that I'm working on. So I'm working on something called the Common Sense HVAC Guide, because the system that I like to do, it's not exotic. Like, you may take a step up in equipment, but the install's not that hard. It's going to take a little bit longer, but there's a few things that you can do in the install. The 2 biggest things, they really don't affect install time, and it can double the life of the equipment. So are you willing to pay for 2 or 3 extra hours of time at install to go from a 10-year piece of equipment that breaks a lot to a 20-year piece of equipment that hardly ever breaks?
Yeah.
I hope you are, but the bad part is, because it's so hard to find contractors to do this, I have to educate homeowners directly. I don't see any other way around. I just tried to create a business model for it, and I know it works, but the curse is the HVAC 2.0 system, that is best done with companies between 3 and 15 million, which is where the owner's still in control. All those just got bought in the last 5 years. They're gone.
Yep.
There's a few, like, you can argue with me, like, but what about this one? Like, yeah, but like 95% of them are gone. So look for, sometimes one-man bands are really good. You just, fundamentally what you're looking for is curiosity. If you can find someone who's curious and likes to learn, and it's like, you want what? Why? But not like, why, you dummy. I'm just like, why do you want that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
And if you can find the curious people that are open to heat pumps, you can get a good install. But the Common Sense HVAC Guide, it's 2 halves. One is written for homeowners, hopefully at a homeowner level. It's hard sometimes, because I genuinely have to explain, like, total external static pressure, which I call duct pressure, the pressure inside the ductwork. It's nerdy, but if I don't teach you about it, you won't get it, and it will have the life of your system. You're going to eat up fans every couple of years, which is dumb, because it's not hard to avoid. There's all these things. So half of it's for homeowners. The other half is for contractors, with the goal of the homeowner printing the contractor half out and handing it to the contractor. And both of them have 5 pages-ish in the beginning, which gives you kind of an overview of what it looks like.
Sure.
But your head's going to spin a little bit, because it's technical, but it has to be, because you have to learn or you will not get the work. But if you hand the guide to a contractor and they go through the first 5 pages, like, this is interesting, they start flipping, hire that person. They're going to do a good job because they care. That's another classic line from my dad, which will get you blurted out here. I haven't sworn much, but I remember him looking at a plumbing job, and he's like, well, that guy's give a shitter ran out. Like, wow, that's just bad. Like, it wasn't any more work to do that better. It was just bad. Now, it could be that, or it could just be ignorance. And oftentimes in the contractor side, it's an ignorance thing. It's not malice in most cases. Yeah. Almost no one thinks they're doing bad work. Most people are. I mean, DOE studied 90% plus of systems have a significant failure point, is something that's way out of whack. But if you can find those smaller guys, so one-man bands, maybe it's a 5-person company, something like that. For now, those are the ones to play with. But to really change the industry from the inside, it's going to take a lot of the smaller private equity type shops changing how they do things to really move a whole lot of the industry. And I don't see the path to that right now. I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, but I just spent 7 years unpaid trying to figure it out. And I'm tired of working for free and leaning on my wife's income and doing Airbnbs and stuff like that. I'd like to actually make a living being a house whisperer. Yeah. So I looked pretty hard. So again, I don't want to say it's impossible, but I don't know what the path is right now.
Yeah. Speaking of house whispering and you, like, where can people find you?
Sure. So I'm all over a lot of social media, but the Electrify Everything group on Facebook. You can email me. It's an old email at this point because I need to get a new one. But it's Nate at N+R. So it's NPLUSR, short for Nate plus Rachel. So Nate at N+R.com. But the Electrify Everything group's a good place. I'm on Twitter as Energy Smart West Virginia, WV. Blue Sky as well, and then LinkedIn. So I'm kind of all over the socials, for better or for worse. And then for learning, go to natethehousewhisperer.com, because anybody here who's listening has got a streak of nerd, because you wouldn't have made it this far without a pretty wide streak. But learn the building science. It's just applied physics for homes. And I wrote a book called The Home Comfort Book back in 2017. That is what I wish I had 20 years ago when I started learning this stuff. Learning building science is painful, as I think you found too. Like there's all this 301, 401, 501 stuff, and you're like, I have no idea what that even is. And that's how I found HVAC for a while too. It's really hard to just dive into HVAC and figure it out. Refrigeration cycle's kind of mind-bending for a little while until you kind of get your head around it. And I still don't have my head all the way around it. But the Home Comfort Book, a huge chunk of it is available free as a digital download, or it's a pretty book. My wife's a designer. She did that one. And then if you want to see some of the house whispering, I've left the website up even though the company's gone, but it's energysmartohio.com. And you can look at 11 really detailed case studies of my house.
I love those case studies. Yeah.
They're detailed, right? Like they're kind of intense.
Yeah.
They got more intense as I did more. That took me a month to put all those together.
Yeah.
That was a lot of work. So I've done all this work, like trying to teach for free, and it's time to make a living doing this. But what I believe moving forward, like, because policy, I think, is basically off the table for a while. Like the odds of doing a congressional act before 2030 are not real high right now. We'll see what happens. Like there's lots of things that can happen, but within this presidency, I think we can say that it's a snowball's chance in hell, considering like all the heat pump stuff is being taken back and whatnot. It's not going to happen this term. But consumer education is key. Contractor education is key. And we need to think really hard about business model, because in playing around with HVAC 2.0, it was not that hard to double both top and bottom line with the same marketing. So like if you can increase closing ratio and a job size, those are magical. Those are two of your best levers. And, you know, a good heat pump job starts 20 grand. They just kind of do. That's where they begin. Like maybe you'll find 18 or 19 if you're in a smaller market, something like that for a higher end piece of equipment. But then the prices are going crazy too. Yeah. Back to the administration. As we're recording this, I don't quite know what's going to happen with tariffs, but there's lots.
My distributors told me 10 to 15% starting next week. So we'll see. We'll see if that happens.
So much uncertainty that's only going to push the price up. And that's another thing on the thought process. Do not think about reducing the price of these systems. It's not there. We need to increase the price of the systems because the average install is abysmal. So like when price is a problem, you have two options. You can increase value or you can decrease price. Decreasing price is not reasonably on the table. So we have to think about increasing value. Comfort is a really, really good way to increase value. What rooms in your house don't you like being in some times of the year or some parts of the day? And you put in a nice system, it can work. One of our other Airbnbs, we just stayed there for 2 weeks, called Moth Manor, based on Mothman, whole house escape room. Like it's this really cool house, but it also has a really nice HVAC system.
Yeah.
And we stayed there for 2 weeks. Man, is that place comfortable. Even when the set point wasn't particularly high. I just walk in, I'm like, oh, it's cozy. I love this place. And that's a mediocre shell in a 1980s house. And we were down to 0 while we were there. It was cold.
Yeah.
And it did its job just fine. So we have to think about value. We need to think about the mainstream. We need to get only heat pumps on shelves. We need to get people used to heat pumps, which is going to require 5 or 10 years of hybrids. We can do it now, or you can argue with me, and we can do it in 10 years. And it's still going to take 10 years. So I fully expect to die before we hit 50% decarb. Please prove me wrong. Because 2050 was possible 3 years ago. And it's not right now because we squandered it with the stupidity of the IRA programs for heat pumps. So, and I've got, listen to the Boundary Spanners podcast. We've done a couple of episodes about that, so we don't need to dive into that. But yeah, it's, God, we could have spent the same money instead of a 1% increase in penetration. We could have had a 100% increase in penetration.
Yeah.
That is such a bad way that we spent the money. And we knew those program designs don't work. We took garbage designs and we put 2 zeros on the budgets. So stupid. So it's really hard. I consistently feel like you watch the disaster movies and there's the scientists. It's like, we shouldn't do this. This is going to happen. It's going to be really bad. And then they ignore them, and that starts the whole movie and all the hell breaking loose. That is me so much that last year I spent just horribly depressed because I had to give up on 2050 and I had to give up on significantly moving the HVAC industry. The only way, if you want to decarbonize homes, we have to change all air conditioners to heat pumps. There is no other way. I can't see any path forward, because if we're installing 5 million air conditioners a year, or even 3 million air conditioners a year, like say we move the needle a whole lot, that's still 3 million systems that are not going in. We have to be at 100% heat pumps for 15 or 20 years before we actually make real progress.
Yeah. And I think one thing you touched on a little bit was cost. Like a decent heat pump install is around 20K. I agree with you on that. But the fact is, a decent AC plus furnace install is also about 20K. So it's not like,
well, it's not. So the cost difference, I usually see $2,000 and $3,000 spreads right now between an air conditioner and a heat pump with whatever bottom end on it. So that's a challenge. But I see plenty of systems in the $10,000 to $14,000 range for replacements. Yeah. But it's all basic equipment. But then it's $2,000 or $3,000 extra for the heat pumps. But there's other things too, like on the equipment side, and this is kind of going to the policy side of things. But like this is a Daikin Fit here. I wanted to try one of these because this is an Asian mini split outdoor unit paired with a communicating American air handler. And it's not very expensive. Like, I was shocked how cheap this system was. I had to drive to freaking Dallas, 20 hours away, to get it from a friend. I probably could have gotten it closer, but I knew I could get it there, and I had a bunch of other people I wanted to see. But this system, I mean, mini splits. You can buy a mini split system, complete system, for like $600. It's not a good one.
On Amazon, yeah. Yep.
But you can. Probably going to be $700 or $800 here in the next month or two. But that's the compressors in those are not expensive. So like if you're looking at $10,000 to $14,000 systems, you should be able to jump to something like what a Daikin Fit is for a couple grand extra. And it's got a few things I don't like in the control. Like it's 85% of my favorite equipment, but it was half the cost. In fact, less than half the cost. So we need to have more systems like this on the market, and they're coming, but oftentimes they're not coming in the best way. They're non-communicating, and then they can't dehumidify, which is a whole other conversation. But I can see a way to at least get the pricing similar, because if you're looking at a basic system for $14,000 or a good system for $30,000, that's a hard lift. But if it can be 14 to 18 or 19, or even 20 or 22. If there's enough pain points from that client, you can probably build that much value and have them sign.
Yeah. And like my I install a lot of those low cost, non-communicating inverter systems. We don't have the humidity problems out here in California. And my cost as a contractor for those is very similar to the single stage and 2-stage equipments from the big brands. So it's a much better system for a very similar cost. So I think there might be a path. We can close with this, but I think if there was a requirement for a certain sensible heat ratio, so how much dehumidification a system can do, it would basically force the manufacturers to switch to inverter units. And oftentimes probably that would be mini split units. And I think there might be a pathway forward on that. I don't know for sure what it is. I've explored all kinds of other paths, and they're all brick walls. There is no way to mandate heat pumps short of literally an act of Congress. I do not see another path forward, not nationally. But if we can have certain requirements for dehumidification, you have to be able to run a cold coil. This is empty now, but if this was a glass of ice water and it's got condensation on the outside, that means that it's cold in there. So it's sucking the moisture out of the air. The colder the coil in your system is, the more it dehumidifies. But most systems are not capable of running a cold coil anymore. So if we can write that in there, I think there may be a path. So that's a nerdy thing, but I think it's going to be a fairly nerdy audience. So yeah. Well, we can't end on nerd talk. Give me one more sentence. It's like,
all right, anyone who's going to buy a new system, tell them they should get a single stage heat pump with a basic furnace at a minimum, with a good filter, and like the ductwork going into the system needs to be large. 2 foot by 2 foot is kind of a rough estimation for a lot of systems. And put a large filter in that's the same size. That will be a much quieter system. That will be a much quieter system. It should use a lot less power. It should be much more comfortable, even though it's basic equipment. So that to me is the bottom line. Do not buy a crappy 1-inch filter. It's going to cause all kinds of issues with longevity of the system. Do not buy a one-way air conditioner. They're dumb. So air conditioners are dumb. How's that for a broad
That's
subject?
perfect. That's perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nate. Thank you for everything you do in like education, community building, all of that. I think there's a lot more people that know about heat pumps and how dumb air conditioners are because of you. So thanks for pushing it forward.
Well, thanks, Shreyas. And thank you for doing what you're doing too, and also being very pragmatic. We need much more pragmatism to actually move things forward, because the political winds are not going to be switching anytime in the near future.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, if you want to follow along with some of that stuff, heatpumps.org. That's where I do a lot of long form writing. There will be more podcasts like this too. So I encourage you to follow along there.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, Nate. See ya.